Hello everyone, and welcome to the next installment of the ever-exciting Lore Corner. So, now that we've finished the game, some of you might be asking, what on earth just happened? The Dark Souls 2 narrative is at times needlessly complex and at others frustratingly sparse. In today's Lore Corner, I'd like to summarize the Curse-Bearer's journey through Drangleic. The story begins with the Curse-Bearer being branded by the Dark Sign and seeking some way to get rid of it. Upon the advice of an old woman who may or may not be the Firekeeper, they set off to Drangleic to find the place where souls can mend your ailing mind. Arriving at what appear to be ruins, some weird Ark of the Covenant crap happens and they fall into a whirlpool. Honestly, to this day I'm sort of unsure of what is going on in this part of the opening cinematic. If I had to guess, I would say that perhaps the Drangleic that we explore might be like Ulasil. It might be in a different time entirely, accessible through curious fissures and tears between worlds, like so many things are in this game. After meeting with the rest of the Firekeepers and the things betwixt, the Curse-Bearer leaves to continue on to the kingdom. Upon reaching Majula, the city of outcasts and lovely vacation spot, the bearer of the curse meets the Emerald Herald, who gives them a lead. Seek mighty souls. And so they do, journeying to the far corners of the realm and claiming the great souls of the four old ones. The Lost Sinner, the Old Iron King, the Rotten, and the Duke's Dear Freya. These souls are necessary to open the way to Castle Drangleic, though I believe that is only one of their purposes. Much like the chosen undead did in the days of old, I think that the ultimate purpose of collecting these great souls is to use them to relink the fire, which is at least Shanalot's endgame. At least presumably. However, there is a fly in the ointment of this narrative. Upon collecting the final great soul, a mysterious being known only as the Scholar of the First Sin contacts the Curse-Bearer in a most spectacular fashion. He offers some insight into the nature of the world of humans, promising to meet again with the Young Hollow. After reaching the castle, the bearer of the curse finds that the king no longer resides there, which is, as we well know by now, it was a predicament. The entire point of coming in the first place was meeting the king. They meet Nishandra instead, the queen of Drangleic. She is not enormously helpful, simply reaffirming our directive to go visit Vendrick, though she fails entirely to mention where he is or how we might reach him. Following the only path available through the king's passage to the Shrine of Amana, the Curse-Bearer enters the Undead Crypt. The Scholar of the First Sin also appears once more to be generally cryptic and to pose an important question. To their disappointment, but perhaps not surprise, the bearer of the curse finds Vendrick thoroughly hollow and completely unresponsive. The only thing they have to show for their entire venture is the king's ring, which the Emerald Herald directs them to use to journey far to the east. The Curse-Bearer fights through Aldia's Keep, a manor filled with curious experiments and research to reach the Dragon Eyrie, and subsequently the Dragon Shrine. In the shrine, the scholar appears again and reveals himself as Lord Aldia. He ends the conversation by asking the Curse-Bearer if they intend to destroy the pleasant illusion that is the Age of Fire. At the top of the Dragon Shrine, the bearer of the curse meets the ancient dragon, and is given the Ashen Mist Heart, a curious relic which can be used to enter the memories of the fallen giants, and not a whole lot else in the way of helpful information. In the giants' memories, not the Chosen Undead, that's a different game, the bearer of the curse meet Captain Drummond, a distinguished soldier of Drangleic who has spent most of his life fighting the invading giant army. From him, they learn that the king once invaded the giants' homeland and returned with a great prize, and that the Iron-Built giants cannot find it in themselves to forgive Vendrick. The Curse-Bearer encounters and defeats the Giant Lord in one final memory, obtaining his soul and the giant's kinship. Another curious artifact that is somewhat vague in its use and purpose. From his soul, we learn that the great prize that the king plundered was not some sort of artifact, but it was the giants themselves. He returned to Drangleic with giant slaves clapped in irons. The Giant Lord and the Last Giant are actually one and the same, which might go some way explaining why the last giant is so furious to see the curse bearer underneath the forest. With the giant's kinship in hand, the way to the throne of want opens. The exact nature of the throne is not really elaborated on, but it is heavily implied to be the kiln of the first flame, or perhaps some fragment or recreation of it. Shanalot appears one final time to tell the bearer of the curse that if they continue, Queen Nishandra will surely come after them. She reasons that the queen covets both the throne and the first flame, and implores the curse bearer to put the queen to rest. Besting the two guardians of the throne, they are then confronted by the now monstrous Nishandra. The two clash and the queen is bested, returning to the tiny fragments of dark from whence she came. However, if the curse bearer has conversed with Aldia all 3 times and killed Vendrick's hollowed shell, he will appear and insist that you tell us your answer, and then attacks. He too is defeated, and either withdraws or loses his physical form, though he is not destroyed by any means, and that is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't believe that Aldia is really an enemy. The bearer is presented with the same choice as the chosen undead was so many eons ago. Do we link the fire, or do we try to find another way? That is the gist of what happens. Let's focus on some specific questions now that probably aren't very well explained by the game. So, what is Nishandra's deal? Nishandra is a child of dark, just like Alana, Nadalia, and Alsana. She formed from fragments of Manus, the father of the Abyss, after his defeat by the chosen undead. This is covered in the Dark Souls 1 DLC, Artorias of the Abyss. The Covetous Queen is defined by her desire for power above all else, and all of her actions reflect that. She convinced Vendrick to invade the land of the giants and create the golems from his captured slaves. Chancellor Wellager said this about Nishandra: She brought peace to her king and her kingdom, a peace so deep it was like the dark. However, sometime after Vendrick was afflicted with the curse of the undead, he became aware of her designs to take the throne for herself, and, at least to some degree, her true nature. Unwilling to acquiesce the throne of want, despite his equal unwillingness to take it himself, he sealed off the means of reaching the throne and fled to the undead crypt with his most loyal knights. Nishandra was unable to overcome Vendrick's safeguards and sat stewing in Castle Drangleic, a prisoner of her own desire. That is, until the bearer of the curse reached her chambers. Seeing an opportunity, she directs the undead champion to continue to seek Vendrick, and subsequently undo the seals on the throne. Her intention was to use them to clear a path to the object of her desire, then eliminate the curse bearer and take the throne of want uncontested. Of course, they have grown too strong for Nishandra to defeat, and so her ambition dies in her Castle Drangleic along with her, a stone's throw away from which she desired above all else. Nishandra's betrayal is not especially surprising, or even really a betrayal at all if you think about it. Her direction happened to be the only possible path for the bearer of the curse to take in the first place. While the queen's actions do not seem especially logical, she has no choice. Unlike normal humans, who have at least a facade of self-determination, the Children of Dark are bound absolutely to their obsessions. She is a tragic pawn of fate and an intrinsically incomplete being, born from the shattered remnants of a primeval soul cruelly driven mad. So, on to the next order of business. What is the ancient dragon, and who is Aldia? Before the release of the Scholar of the First Sin, it was widely hypothesized that the ancient dragon was Lord Aldia, who through his experiments extended to the form of an artificial dragon made from the souls of giants. This theory was prompted by Nishandra and Shalkor's comments about the dragon. Nishandra calls the dragon a prop, a false deity, and Shalkor remarks that it seems to be playing the part of something greater than it actually is. The visual cues and item descriptions found in Aldi's Keep make great mention of bizarre experiments, wicked rituals, and generally unethical behavior. The dragon area is located directly behind the manor, with a specifically constructed aviary for one of the guardian dragons that blocks the way to the elevator. Lastly, as we explored not too long ago, if the player fights and defeats the ancient dragon, they are not awarded with an ancient dragon's soul, but instead a giant's soul. Now, with recent revelations, this theory no longer works entirely. However, it really only requires a few minor modifications to still fit. Aldea created the ancient dragon, but did not become it himself. Which is, something that was entirely possible from the get-go. The ancient dragon was simply one of his many projects, much like Shanalot was, I can only assume. As for Aldea himself, who is he? Let's start with what we know. Aldea is the brother of Vendrick, a brilliant scientist, and was once in partnership with the king to find a way to end the undead curse. They later had a falling out, and Vendrick confined his brother to the mansion. The reason is unknown, but it's not especially hard to imagine that even Vendrick took issue with some of Aldea's more gruesome methods. After this, he became more and more intent on his research and withdrew from the world entirely, never to be seen again, except by the player in a far more monstrous form. Now, the real question, how did he end up this way? Aldea himself does not comment, merely saying that he has lost everything. However, I think the clue lies in his title, and the nature of his transfigurement. He is the scholar of the first sin, but what exactly is the first sin? There are many events that could take this title, such as the start of the war against the dragons by Gwyn, but I think that from the perspective of humanity, the original sin was likely the Witch of Isolith's attempt to recreate the first flame, because that eventually created a whole lot of problems. If Aldea was searching for a way to undo the undead curse, then an artificial first flame would likely be a step in the right direction. He is a scholar of the first sin because he sought to recreate that sin. Perhaps unwise, but desperation and a certain disregard for ethics conduct can lead to poor decision-making. Further, note what Aldea has become. A writhing mass of thorny roots and flame. A design very evocative of Lost Isolith and the Bed of Chaos, albeit even more disfigured somehow. The Witch of Isolith became the Bed of Chaos, the birthplace of demons, due to her immense power. She was, after all, one of the original leaders of the Lord Souls. Yeah, I said that right. one of the original leaders and wielders of the Lord Souls. Aldea, however, was just kind of a guy, and lacking such power became the shambling mess he is today because he failed to account for the fact that if one of the greatest sages ever to walk the earth failed to achieve an artificial first flame, he had little chance of succeeding. Thus, the effect was minor and contained more or less only to him. That explains his origins, but why does he attack you at the end of the game? Now, this is never really answered anywhere, so we're going to have to go into pure speculative territory, but I believe that Aldea is not hostile, but is instead testing the Cursebearer's convictions. You can't really kill an undead, after all, and he has no intention of taking the throne for himself, if he even can. He asks for them to give us your answer before the fight begins. Presumably, he does not want to hear words, but the strength of the Cursebearer's will as expressed through steel. Ultimately, I believe that he wants to safeguard you from a path you may not be ready to take, rejecting the throne. Since you express a desire to destroy the illusion of the Age of Fire, however, he attacks to see if you have the strength of character to truly embark on a path never trodden, or at least very seldom trodden before. I don't think that he is especially invested in protecting the Age of Fire. He will continue to speak with you if you choose to forsake the throne, and not in a tone that indicates he is particularly upset. Aldea is instead pensive and reflective. He speaks of the difficulties ahead that the bearer of the curse must face, the great dark unknown. Above all, I think that he is interested to see what the curse-bearer will achieve. He is, after all, a scholar. Lastly, who is the Emerald Herald? The identity of the Emerald Herald is at once straightforward and convoluted. In simple terms, Shanalot was an artificially created being, another on the long list of Lord Aldea's scientific indiscretions. In her own words, the Herald did not come out as intended. Given her purpose in Majula, and considering what Noblon says about her, it seems likely that Aldea attempted, at one point, to create a firekeeper of his very own. The purpose of this is fairly obvious if you think about it. Firekeepers are in charge of keeping the flames lit. If you can simply make more of them, the fires won't die, there will be no curse. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually work like this, so Shalot is just another failed experiment. Of course, she is also possessed of humanity and compassion, and just because she cannot literally stop the world from ending, doesn't mean that she's useless even for the very, results-oriented Aldia. Thus, Aldia sent her to live in safe seclusion with his pet dragons. And it is implied that she was born in the area anyway. The implication seems to be that Shalot has never actually left the area in a physical sense, with her curious ability to appear everywhere, and that she mentions that her aspect led the curse-bearer to her. One can assume that the Herald has some sort of astral projection ability. The real mystery with Shalot is not necessarily who she is, but what she wants. In her own words, she wants to be set free from the shackles of fate. To be totally honest, I don't really know what that entails. She's not undead, or at the very least she hasn't gone hollow. Perhaps the solution is as simple as that the Herald wanted to leave the area for real and go do real person things, but is instead bound to Drangleic until the crisis is resolved. That is certainly one possibility. Maybe instead she's speaking about the cyclical nature of the world in which she is bound to live, or perhaps her unending task wherein she must lead countless undead to their dooms on a fool's errand. Whatever the case, her true nature is still left almost entirely up to speculation. I think that should probably do it for the most confusing aspects of the game. I'll speak more on connections between Dark Souls 1 and 2 in a separate video. If you have any questions, or if you feel like I've missed something or drawn an erroneous conclusion, imagine that, leave a comment or make a post in the thread. I like to talk about the Souls games.